Hey guys, welcome back. If you're listening to this while slowly melting into your pillow, don't worry. I'll keep the tone as flat and soothing as the open sea Columbus kept getting lost on, which honestly was most of the time. Tonight, we're drifting deeper into the life of a man who believed he could reach Asia by just going the other way. A bold idea, for sure. A correct one? Not even close. So let's settle in. Deep breath. Let's float right back into the late 15th century, where everyone wore too much wool, maps were politely described as vibes-based, and most explorers had a casual tendency to die of scurvy before accomplishing anything meaningful. Except Columbus. He somehow survived long enough to become both a national holiday and a heated Twitter argument. A very impressive resume. Columbus and his mildly confusing confidence. By the time Columbus reached the Spanish court, he had already spent years telling different European monarchs that the world was a lot smaller than scientists said it was. He didn't believe the scholars, he didn't believe the mathematicians, and he definitely didn't believe the people who were literally measuring things with astronomy. Nope. He trusted vibes. Just pure, unfiltered confidence. The kind of confidence only a man with zero map reading skills can have. He insisted Asia was just a few thousand nautical miles west of Europe, which was wildly incorrect. Like, you missed the continent the size of North America. Incorrect. But he stuck to his argument with the firmness of a man who absolutely refuses to admit he took the wrong turn on the highway. And because persistence sometimes beats accuracy, Spanish monarchs Ferdinand and Isabella eventually said, "Fine, go ahead, try it." They probably assumed he'd sail out, come back embarrassed, then quietly retire. Spoiler, that's not what happened. Funding the Voyage Royal Edition. The Spanish crown finally gave Columbus a deal that sounded great if you didn't think too hard about it. He would get fancy titles, a percentage of all profits, and control over any new lands he discovered. You know, lands with people who were already living there. But this was the age of discovery, where logic and ethics took a nice long nap, and people were more focused on spices, gold, and the thrill of sending sailors into the unknown, hoping they wouldn't die in the first 6 minutes. Columbus gathered his 3 ships, the Niña, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria, 3 vessels that were by modern standards about the size of your average suburban house. And with a crew that wasn't exactly thrilled about following a guy whose entire plan was, "Trust me, Asia is that way." Still, off they sailed. Life on the voyage, a floating sleep paralysis experience. Life at sea in 1492 wasn't glamorous. The food was terrible, mostly dried biscuits, salted meat, and the occasional worm that got a free ride. The water went stale quickly, and bathing was just a distant memory everyone pretended didn't matter. Columbus, meanwhile, walked around with that quiet, delusional confidence of someone who insists the GPS is wrong. He kept 2 logbooks, one with the real distances and one with fake distances to trick the crew so they wouldn't panic. Truly a masterclass in we'll lie about it and hope for the best. The crew complained constantly. They muttered, they questioned the plan, they expressed reasonable concerns like, are we going to die out here? Columbus just kept pointing west and saying, Asia is right there, which Asia was absolutely not right there. Land ho, but not Asia. After weeks of drifting across the Atlantic and probably questioning every decision that led them there, the crew finally saw land. Birds, vegetation, the whole relaxing tropical landscape. Columbus, absolutely committed to the bit, declared it was Asia, specifically the Indies. He insisted on it so hard that he called the locals Indians, a name that would stick for centuries because he couldn't admit he was wrong geographically by about an entire ocean. But the island was really part of the Bahamas. The locals were the Taino people, and nothing about the place remotely resembled Asia. Columbus explored the area with quiet satisfaction, as if the universe had just rewarded him for being confident instead of correct. The Taino, the people Columbus absolutely misread. The Taino people were peaceful, skilled, generous, and genuinely curious about these strange newcomers. They offered food, gifts, and help. Basically the exact opposite of what Columbus would later give them in return. Columbus described them as kind and friendly. He also described them as potential servants who could be easily subdued. It was a mix of compliments and ominous foreshadowing, delivered with the tone of someone admiring a cute cat while also contemplating stealing it. He noticed they wore gold ornaments. Not much gold, just small pieces. But for a European explorer, gold was like catnip. You could almost hear the cha-ching sound in his journal entries. Gold fever, the 15th century version of a midlife crisis. Columbus began asking for gold with the subtlety of a tourist demanding Wi-Fi passwords. The Taino people pointed vaguely in different directions, probably meaning somewhere far away. Columbus interpreted this as, yes, absolutely, there are endless mountains of gold. He became obsessed with finding it, and that obsession would become the root of nearly everything dark that followed. The search wasn't casual. It wasn't respectful. It was driven by raw greed, royal expectations, and Columbus's personal fear that he'd return to Spain with nothing but sunburns and regrets. So he pushed harder, demanded more, expected tribute, and began treating the locals as resources, not people. A subtle slide into tyranny. At first, the relationship between Columbus and the Taino was peaceful, but as days turned into weeks and weeks into months, the shift became clearer. Columbus expected obedience. He expected labor. He expected gold that didn't exist. His men, unsupervised and often poorly disciplined, began committing acts of theft and violence against the Taino. The Taino tried to push back in calm ways, requests, warnings, distancing themselves. But resistance only made Columbus tighten control. He enforced rules through intimidation. He began taking captives, and he leaned into cruelty in a way that was systematic. This wasn't the romantic explorer story every elementary school textbook likes to promote. This was domination. Slow, deliberate, and rooted in a worldview where European arrival automatically meant authority, not exactly the behavior of a heroic adventurer. The first return to Spain, spin doctor mode. When Columbus finally sailed back to Spain, he didn't say, "Hey, so I found some islands, annoyed the locals, and failed to reach Asia." No. He told the royal court he found a new route to the Indies. He exaggerated the wealth. He talked about endless gold. He promised prosperity. He brought a few Taino people with him, captives, to prove the existence of new subjects. It created a spectacle, and the royal monarchs, thrilled by the possibility of wealth, showered him with praise, titles, and more funding. He became a celebrity, a hero, a man celebrated for discovering, well, a place that was never lost. It was great PR, but reality was something else. the second voyage, from explorer to enforcer. This time, Columbus didn't return with 3 small ships. He returned with 17 ships and over 1,000 men, including soldiers. That alone tells you this voyage was less about discovery and more about control. When he reached the islands again, the tone had completely changed. The Spanish expected gold, conquest, and new colonies. Columbus was now seen as the governor, the ruler, the one responsible for turning peaceful islands into profitable assets. He enforced tribute systems. He punished resistance. He demanded quotas of gold the Tainos simply could not meet. If they failed, consequences followed. Harsh ones, cruel